What if the calm sky above your house right now is the last quiet afternoon you get for a while? Somewhere out over the open Atlantic, a wave of energy is already moving toward the Caribbean, and by the time you finish this video, you will know exactly what it means for you. Before we go any further, do one thing for me. Tap that like button right now, not because I asked nicely, but because this channel runs on people like you sharing real information instead of scrolling past it. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and send this to one person who lives anywhere near the Caribbean, Florida, or the Gulf. It could be the difference between them planning ahead and getting caught off guard. Now let's get into it. For weeks, the Caribbean has felt strangely still. If you live on one of these islands, you already know the feeling. The grass turns a little more yellow every day. The reservoirs sit lower than they should. Farmers check the sky every morning and see nothing but blue. This kind of dry stretch is not unusual in early hurricane season, but it does not make it any less frustrating for the people living through it. There is a reason for that dryness, and it is bigger than just bad luck. This year we are dealing with an El Nino pattern sitting out in the Pacific. El Nino has a strange effect on the Atlantic side of the world. It sends stronger upper-level winds racing across the Caribbean Sea, and those winds act like a hand pushing down on anything trying to grow. Thunderstorms that would normally build into something bigger get sheared apart before they have a chance. That is a big part of why this year has felt so unusually calm compared to past seasons. But calm never lasts forever in hurricane season, and right now the pattern is starting to shift. Meteorologists have been tracking a tropical wave moving west across the Atlantic, and it is now approaching the eastern Caribbean, somewhere near Puerto Rico and the islands just south of it. A tropical wave is not a hurricane. It is not even a storm yet. Think of it as a ripple of low pressure and moisture, riding along in the trade winds, carrying the potential for heavy rain and gusty conditions, without necessarily becoming anything more organized. But every hurricane that has ever formed started out exactly like this, as a simple wave that nobody was worried about yet. As of the most recent official outlook from the National Hurricane Center, there is no tropical cyclone formation expected in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, or the Gulf over the coming week. I want to say that clearly because I am not here to scare you. I'm not going to take a harmless disturbance and dress it up as an emergency just to keep you watching. That is not what this channel is about. But I also want you to understand something important. Forecasters do not need a storm to be spinning yet in order to watch it closely. The fact that this wave is well organized, moving quickly and heading straight for populated islands is enough reason to pay attention, even without a name attached to it yet. Here's the part that might surprise you. This wave, in its current form, could actually be a good thing. After weeks of dry ground and empty reservoirs, a burst of tropical rain is exactly what many islands have been hoping for. Farmers need it. Water supplies need it. The problem is that tropical systems rarely deliver rain evenly. One town gets soaked while the next town over barely feels a drop. That unevenness is part of what makes tracking these systems so tricky, and it is exactly why I want to walk you through this piece by piece instead of giving you a vague, one-size-fits-all answer. There is another character in this story, and if you live anywhere near the islands, you have probably already noticed it. Without knowing what it was, a wide layer of Saharan dust has drifted across the Atlantic and settled over parts of the Caribbean. If the sky above you has looked a little hazy lately, if sunsets have taken on a strange orange tint, if you have felt a scratch in your throat that will not go away, this dust plume is very likely the reason. It travels every single year from the deserts of North Africa, riding the trade winds thousands of miles across the ocean before settling over the islands, and sometimes reaching as far as Florida and Texas. For most healthy people, this dust is simply an inconvenience. Hazy skies, slightly reduced visibility, maybe a little extra sneezing. But if you have asthma, allergies, or any kind of respiratory condition, this is worth taking seriously. Doctors consistently see a rise in breathing-related complaints whenever a thick dust plume settles in. If that describes you or someone in your household, this is a good week to keep rescue inhalers close, limit time outside during the hottest, hazier parts of the day, and pay attention to how your body responds. Now here is where the story gets genuinely interesting, and it is the part almost nobody talks about when they cover tropical waves. Dust and tropical development do not get along. Saharan dust is extremely dry, and it carries a layer of warm, stable air high above the ocean surface. When a tropical wave tries to push through a dust plume, the dry air chokes off the moisture the wave needs to build thunderstorms. It is a bit like trying to start a campfire with wet wood while someone stands there blowing a hairdryer full of hot, dry air directly at the flames. The fire struggles to catch, no matter how much fuel you throw at it. This is actually one of the quiet heroes of a calm hurricane season. Every year, meteorologists watch waves come off the African coast looking promising, only to watch them fall apart entirely once they run into a thick dust layer. It happens more often than people realize, and it is a big reason why the Atlantic has not been more active already this year. So what happens when the current wave meets the dust sitting over the islands right now? The most likely outcome is a messy, uneven mix of rain. Some islands will see soaking downpours that finally break the dry spell. Others, just a short distance away, will barely notice anything happened at all. This is simply how the atmosphere behaves when moisture is fighting against dry air at the same time. It is not a flaw in the forecast. It is just how these systems work. If you are in the Eastern Caribbean, especially around Puerto Rico and the islands just to the south and east, keep an eye on your local forecast over the next few days. Showers and thunderstorms tied to this wave are expected to move through, and while nothing here points toward organized tropical development in the short term, gusty winds and heavy downpours are still very possible in a short window of time. If you are planning anything outdoors this week, a boat trip, a hike, an outdoor event, build in a backup plan. Not because disaster is coming, but because sudden downpours from a tropical wave can turn a clear morning into a soaked afternoon with very little warning. Before we move further into what comes next, I want to pause and do something a little different for a CTA this time. If you have made it this far, you clearly care about staying informed instead of just being entertained. So here is my ask. Drop a comment right now and tell me which island or which coastline you're watching this from. I rate every single one, and knowing where you are helps me shape future updates around the places that matter most to this audience. While you're there, hit that share icon and send this to someone who has family in the Caribbean. They will thank you for it. Now let's zoom out, because a single tropical wave never tells the whole story. It is one piece of a much bigger picture playing out across the ocean right now. And understanding that bigger picture is what separates a casual observer from someone who actually knows what to watch for. Behind this first wave, there are more waves lined up, like traffic on a highway, some still forming off the coast of West Africa, others already crossing the open Atlantic. This is completely normal for early August. This is historically the point in the season when the atmosphere starts to wake up. Ocean water is warmer now than it was even a month ago. Wind shear, which had been tearing storms apart earlier in the summer, is beginning to relax in certain corners of the basin. None of that guarantees a hurricane is coming, but it does mean the ingredients for one are slowly assembling themselves piece by piece, the same way they do every single year around this time. This is exactly why meteorologists never look at hurricane season as one long flat stretch of danger or one long flat stretch of calm. It moves in phases. Early summer is often quiet because of dry air and dust drifting off Africa. Then, usually sometime in August, the atmosphere flips a switch, dust plumes become less frequent, ocean heat keeps building, and the waves coming off Africa. Start finding a more favorable environment to grow in. If you have been told your whole life that hurricane season really gets serious in August and September, that is not a myth. It is simply how the ocean and atmosphere behave together, year after year. So while nothing on the map right now is showing signs of becoming a dangerous storm in the immediate future, the direction we are heading in matters. A quiet week today does not mean a quiet month ahead. This is the part of the season where you want to build the habit of checking in regularly, not out of fear, but out of preparation. The people who weather these storms the best are rarely the ones who panicked at the first sign of a cloud. They are the ones who quietly kept an eye on things, updated their supplies a little at a time, and never had to scramble at the last minute. Let's talk about what this actually means for daily life over the next several days, because forecasts are only useful if they translate into something you can actually use. If you live in the Eastern Caribbean, expect a stretch of unsettled weather as this wave and the moisture around it continue moving through. Some days will bring clear skies with only isolated afternoon showers. Other days could bring longer stretches of rain, especially closer to sunset when tropical showers tend to intensify. This pattern, sunny mornings followed by building clouds and afternoon downpours, is extremely common in the tropics during this time of year, and it is worth planning your outdoor activities around mornings when possible. If you are further west, closer to Hispaniola, Jamaica, and Cuba, keep watching for scattered thunderstorms as moisture continues drifting through the region over the coming days. The terrain across these islands plays a bigger role than most people realize. Mountainous areas can squeeze extra rain out of even a modest tropical disturbance, which means inland and hillside communities sometimes see far more rainfall than coastal areas just a short drive away. If you live near higher ground or in an area with a history of flash flooding, this is worth keeping in mind, especially if heavier rain bands move through overnight while you are asleep. Down towards Central America, including areas like Costa Rica, Panama, and parts of Honduras and Guatemala, the rainy season is already well underway, independent of anything happening out in the open Atlantic. Adding extra tropical moisture on top of an already wet pattern raises the chance of heavier downpours capable of producing localized flooding, particularly in low-lying areas and near rivers that are already running high from recent rain. And if you're in Florida or along the Gulf Coast, this is a good moment to simply stay aware rather than alarmed. Nothing currently points toward a direct hurricane threat to the mainland United States in the short term. But frontal systems moving through the southeast are capable of teaming up with tropical moisture drifting north from the Caribbean. And when that happens, it can produce some genuinely heavy rainfall, even without a named storm anywhere on the map. If you notice your local forecast mentioning several inches of rain over a short window, that is often exactly this kind of setup playing out. I want to take a moment here to explain something that trips a lot of people up, because I think it will genuinely change how you read weather updates for the rest of this season. There is a real difference between a storm being named and a storm being dangerous. A disorganized tropical wave with no name attached to it can still dump 6 inches of rain on a town in a single afternoon. Meanwhile, a weak, technically named tropical storm sitting far out at sea might do nothing more than stir up some ocean swells. The name is not the danger. The behavior of the system is the danger. This is why I always encourage people to pay attention to rainfall totals, flood watches, and wind advisories from your local weather service, rather than waiting for a headline that says hurricane before taking any of this seriously. Here is something else worth understanding, because it explains a lot of the confusion people feel every single hurricane season. Forecast models do not always agree with each other, especially several days out. One model might show a wave staying weak and disorganized. Another might show slow strengthening as it moves further west. This is not because forecasters do not know what they are doing. It is because the atmosphere is an incredibly complex system, and small differences in starting conditions can lead to very different outcomes several days down the line. The further out a forecast reaches, the more that uncertainty grows. This is exactly why meteorologists constantly update their outlooks as new data comes in, rather than locking in one answer and walking away from it. If you take nothing else away from this video, take this. The single best thing you can do during a stretch like this is not to panic, and it is not to ignore it either. It is to build a simple habit of checking in. A quick look at your local forecast each morning, a general sense of what is happening out in the Atlantic, knowing where the nearest shelter is if you live in a flood-prone area. None of that requires fear. It just requires a little bit of steady attention, the same kind of attention a good driver pays to the road even when traffic looks completely normal. All right, quick pause here, because if this update has been useful to you, there is something simple you can do that actually helps. Scroll down, leave a comment with one word describing the weather where you are right now: rain, sun, haze, wind, whatever fits. It takes 5 seconds, and it helps me understand exactly who is watching and from where. And if you have not already subscribed, now is the moment, because the next few weeks of this season are only going to get more active, not less. Let's talk for a moment about why this particular stretch of the season deserves extra attention, even with nothing officially brewing on the map today. Every major hurricane in recorded history started out as something small. Somewhere, at some point, it was just a cluster of thunderstorms drifting over warm water, completely unremarkable, easy to ignore. The organized, terrifying storms we see on the news, the ones with names everyone remembers years later, all of them began as quiet little disturbances that most people scrolled right past without a second thought. That is not meant to scare you. It is meant to explain why meteorologists take even boring-looking tropical waves seriously enough to track them day after day. Not because every wave becomes a monster, because the overwhelming majority never do, but because you cannot know in advance which one will be the exception. The only responsible approach is to watch all of them with the same patient attention, right up until the atmosphere makes it clear which direction things are heading. This is also a good moment to talk honestly about why weather coverage online has earned such a mixed reputation. You have probably seen videos online with dramatic titles claiming a monster storm is about to devastate an entire coastline, using a forecast map from a single model run that has already changed by the time you are watching. That kind of coverage gets clicks fast, but it also trains people to either panic unnecessarily, or worse, to become numb and stop taking real warnings seriously when they eventually come. Neither outcome helps anyone. My goal here is different. I would rather tell you clearly and calmly what we actually know, what we do not know yet, and what is worth watching, so that when something genuinely serious does show up, you trust the information enough to actually act on it. So let's bring this back to where we started. Right now, a tropical wave is moving through the Caribbean. It is running into a layer of dry Saharan dust that is likely to limit how much it can organize in the short term. It is bringing badly needed rain to islands that have gone far too long without it, even if that rain lands unevenly from one town to the next. Behind it, more waves are lined up out in the Atlantic, a completely normal pattern for this point. In the season, as the atmosphere slowly transitions from the quieter stretch we have had toward the more active period that August and September typically bring. Nothing here points to an immediate hurricane threat to the Caribbean or the mainland United States. The National Hurricane Center's most recent outlook does not show tropical cyclone formation expected in the coming days across the Atlantic, the Caribbean, or the Gulf. But that can and will change as the season progresses, and the smartest thing you can do is stay in the habit of checking rather than waiting for a crisis to force you to pay attention all at once. If you live in the Caribbean, here is a simple, practical way to think about the days ahead. Expect on and off showers, some heavier than others, especially in the afternoons and evenings. Keep an eye on hazy skies and reduced air quality if you have any breathing sensitivities, since the dust plume is still lingering in the region. Avoid making major outdoor plans without a backup option, since downpours from a tropical wave can appear and disappear within an hour. And if you notice your local weather service issuing any flood watches or advisories, take them seriously, even if the word hurricane is nowhere in the alert. Flash flooding from a disorganized tropical wave has caused more damage in the Caribbean over the years than people often realize, precisely because it does not carry the same dramatic warning that a named storm does. If you live in Florida, the Gulf Coast, or anywhere along the southeastern United States, the message is similar. Stay aware, not alarmed. Frontal systems interacting with tropical moisture can produce heavy rainfall even without a hurricane anywhere nearby. So keep an eye on your local forecast for flood-related alerts over the coming days, particularly if you live in a low-lying area. And if you are simply someone who enjoys understanding how weather works, someone who likes knowing what is happening out there in the ocean, even if it never directly affects you, welcome. This channel exists for people exactly like you, people who would rather understand a system calmly than be surprised by it later. And let's dig a little deeper into why this particular mix of ingredients, warm water, a weakening dust layer, and a steady parade of tropical waves tends to matter so much once we move deeper into August. Ocean heat works like fuel sitting in a tank. Early in the season, the fuel is still building up, and even when a wave finds itself in a favorable spot, there often is not quite enough warm water beneath it. By the time you reach the heart of hurricane season, that tank is much fuller. Water that was a comfortable 27 or 28 degrees Celsius in June can climb noticeably higher by late August, and that extra heat gives any organizing system far more energy to work with. This is part of why forecasters often describe the season as climbing toward a peak rather than staying flat. And it is also why a pattern shift happening right now, even a small one, tends to carry more weight than it would have a month ago. The Saharan dust layer follows its own seasonal rhythm as well, and understanding it helps explain why some years feel unusually quiet while others feel relentless. Dust outbreaks tend to be strongest and most frequent during June, and July gradually tapering off as August progresses. That does not mean dust disappears entirely. Waves of it can still drift across the Atlantic well into September, but the outbreaks generally become less frequent and less intense as the season matures. That tapering effect is a big reason why waves that fell apart in July sometimes look completely different when a similar wave rolls through in late August or September. Less dry air fighting against them means more of that ocean heat we just talked about actually gets a chance to be used. Put those two trends together, rising ocean heat and fading dust interference, and you get a pretty clear picture of why the back half of hurricane season tends to feel so different from the front half. It is not random. It is the atmosphere slowly shifting the odds, week by week, in favor of stronger development. None of this means every wave from here forward will turn into something dangerous. Most still will not. But it does mean the coin, so to speak, is being weighted a little differently than it was even 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that is exactly the kind of shift worth understanding rather than ignoring. I also want to spend a moment on something practical, because understanding a storm's science only matters if it changes what you actually do. If you live in a hurricane-prone region, whether that is the Caribbean, Florida, the Gulf Coast, or anywhere else in this basin's reach, early August is genuinely one of the best times to quietly get your preparations in order before there is any actual storm forcing your hand. Check that your emergency supplies, water, flashlights, batteries, a first aid kit are still usable and not something you bought 3 seasons ago and forgot. Know your evacuation zone if you live near the coast. Have a simple plan for pets, elderly family members, or anyone in your household who might need extra time to move quickly if a real warning is ever issued. None of this requires fear or urgency today. It simply requires 5 or 10 quiet minutes sometime this week, done calmly, long before you would ever need to use any of it in a hurry. One more thing worth mentioning, because I know from the comments on past videos that a lot of you ask about it. Even a storm that never makes landfall can still affect you. Ocean swells generated by a distant system can travel hundreds of miles, creating dangerous rip currents on beaches that are otherwise seeing perfectly sunny, calm weather. If you are planning a beach day anywhere in the Caribbean, Florida, or along the Gulf over the coming weeks, it is always worth checking the local surf and rip current forecast, even when the sky above you looks completely harmless. Some of the most dangerous days at the beach are the ones that look the most peaceful from the shore. Quick moment here before we close things out, and I want to try something different for this last one. Instead of just asking you to like or subscribe, I want you to actually use what you just learned. Next time you check the weather app on your phone, look past the little sun or cloud icon and actually read the forecast discussion if your local service provides one. Notice how they talk about uncertainty, about ranges, about things that could change. That habit alone will make you a sharper, calmer follower of weather news for the rest of your life. And if this video helped build that habit even a little, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep making updates like this one. I want to be honest about something before we wrap up. I do not know exactly what this season has in store. Nobody does. Not with certainty, not this early. What I do know is that patterns like the one we are seeing right now, a slow transition from a dry, quiet stretch into a more active one, tend to repeat themselves almost every single year. Understanding that pattern will not stop a storm from forming, but it will help you feel steady and prepared instead of caught off guard. And honestly, that feeling of being prepared is worth more than any single forecast could ever give you. So here is where things stand as we close this out. The Caribbean is finally seeing a shift after weeks of dry, quiet weather. A tropical wave is moving through the region, running into Saharan dust that is likely to limit its organization for now, while still delivering rain that many islands genuinely need. More waves are lined up behind it, a normal and expected part of early August as hurricane season slowly builds toward its most active stretch. Nothing currently points toward an imminent hurricane threat, but the pattern is clearly shifting from quiet toward active, and that shift alone deserves your attention. Storms do not begin with sirens and red banners across your screen. They begin exactly like this, as a quiet ripple crossing warm water that almost nobody is watching yet. The people who stay ready are not the ones who panic the loudest. They are the ones who pay attention early, calmly, one update at a time, long before there's ever a reason to worry. Stay aware this week. Check your local forecast, especially if you live near the coast or in a low-lying area. Keep your emergency supplies fresh, even if the sky outside your window looks perfectly calm right now, because calm is exactly how every single hurricane season quietly begins. I will be back the moment anything meaningful changes out there, whether that means a wave organizing further, a new system forming off the African coast, or a shift in the pattern that actually deserves your attention. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and I will see you in the next update.